And so we return and begin again. This is part 2 of issuesode 16 of the Invisible podcast. We are going issue by issue, page by page, theory by theory, panel by panel, blah blah blah, through Grant Morrison's Cosmic Conspiracy classic from the 90s, The Invisibles. The first half of this, I just kind of tried it as a live stream last week. The live stream bit didn't work, but I did ramble on for an hour, and we got nearly 2 pages into the comic. I talked about Dread Zone, and we are at a particular point in British, but let's be honest, it's English kind of history, like a kind of arguably like a soft spot where the country is, or the kind of the culture making bit of the country, is trying to vampirize its past and bring together these 2 kind of strands. One we're going to call rockist and the other one we're going to call poptimist, 2 strands which are going to kind of intersect and create this kind of mid-90s January 1996 moment, or it's a particular moment, but it's kind of imprecise. But this kind of mid-90s moment, it's going to create like a consciousness, a way of being and seeing and thinking and having a country that's like what it is, using the past, its own kind of image from the 60s, which it's inventing, let's remember. And this kind of these 2 strands, these like working class, middle class, if you like, strands of British culture, trying to sort of see how they work to create a Britain that's going to be all right in the 1990s, basically, or really in the 21st century. It's using this point in the mid-90s to build a 21st century England. So this is part 2. That's what we did in part 1, and we're on to page, pretty sure, 3. Boom. So page 2, just to recap, Dane has nicked some sandwiches and has ducked into an alleyway, and as he's enjoying his sandwiches, whoa, that was close one. He bumps into Robin and Boy, his erstwhile invisible teammates, who he kind of ditched a few months ago, but you can't really blame him. So he kind of hides. We learn that Boy is kind of from Harlem. She's not enjoying the heat, and they're looking for Jack, but they're doing it kind of half-heartedly because it's hot and they kind of don't like him. And so they go to look for a cyber cafe on Tottenham Court Road to enjoy some cool, refreshing smart drinks. So I guess this happens just before they go and get their smart drinks in the previous arc. They're kind of the Boy and Ragged Robin bits that they're doing in the She-Man arc. Yeah? A couple of issues ago. Or was it just 1 issue ago? We're still on lockdown here in England, and it's impossible to know. It's impossible to know. The mind, she has gone. Sanity is as deserted as the streets. Boy says the word please, and there's this weird little flash, and it's not a flashback. We'll find out in a couple of pages' time what a flashback looks like. So what's this? Is this a flash forward? Is Jack, and Jack kind of sees this, and it's either a fantasy of him doing it with Boy, why not? Why wouldn't you? And why wouldn't a boy his age have that fantasy? But also, or is he having a flash of the future? Or, given what we know about Jack being kind of Dane Jack being kind of special powers wise, is he, are his fantasies and are his future different? Do they kind of become the same thing? It's weird. So, like, obviously, London's the biggest city in England. It's the best place to get lost, you'd think. But it's also, as this kind of like near miss illustrates, it's also quite a good place to get found, or find yourself. Yeah. When you kind of upgrade your understanding of like probability a bit, and you think about where the main bits in London are, those kind of concentrations where one would expect things to be busy enough to hide inside. When you kind of like map the map of the city to them and think about the main places and the main highways and the kind of the activities that people there do, and you layer up these sites and the roads, and then actually one of the things you start to notice about London is that it's actually a very good place to bump into people who you need to bump into. It's a very good place for bringing people together. So this near miss isn't fantastical in any way. This is just kind of what happens when you're trying to lose yourself in London. So it's kind of an effect of London's like magic or spirit, if you like, which arises from the way that it's made physically and what it kind of forces the people to walk its streets to do. That's kind of what magic is. It's not, or that's what a spirit is. It's not separate from the physical fact of the place or the person. They're intertwined and they work into each other. So London's spirit is the way that it is, not just because of, but partly because of the way that it's laid out. So these kind of unlikely events, London's actually good at making more likely. It's kind of one of the reasons why it's become such a successful place. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of what happened here. The other kind of feature I like about this page is this guy's face here. As we've established, Paul Johnson is amazing at doing facial expressions, body language, making kind of inconsequential, seemingly background characters feel like real beings. Now, this guy, who are we going with here? Who do we think that looks like? Are we going with? It's either like Max Clifford, the evil, and now no one really misses him, dead PR guru who was maybe didn't look quite as old as that in the 90s, or like a slightly thinner Ian Paisley. Right, who do we think that is? I'm going with Paisley, but either is a good candidate in my view. And this near miss here, and what it kind of stirs up for Jack messes him up a bit. So again, he's in this wonderfully sort of dusty, dottily drawn kind of state of discombobulation after having just missed them. And obviously, this has set off a chain of association and thinking for him. And he goes and he's not really enjoying his sandwiches anymore, but he's in fact giving them to the pigeons on Hyde Park. We can see Marble Arch here. I've got like a new camera and or a new app to do my recording through, and it's showing me like a backwards image, which is a bit annoying. So I'm not really sure where my finger is when I'm pointing at things. But that that there is Marble Arch. So we know that this is Hyde Park, and we know that this is one of the first sites that we see in London, and it's the first time we see Jack in London when he's in issue 2 listening to the guy talking about elf generators in Speaker's Corner. This is just near Speaker's Corner. He's feeding the pigeons because he was kind of taught to feed the pigeons as part of his magical initiation from Tom. We'll get to that in a minute. We've got some yellow flowers here. Now, when we see yellow flowers in London parks previously, they've been daffodils. This is this like high summer, so they're not going to be daffodils. They're going to be probably, I'm thinking, they could be anything. They could be buttercups. They look like big buttercups. They look a bit like daffodils, but they can't be daffodils in the summer. They look a bit like, they could be big buttercups. They could be dandelions. Dandelion energy fits with this issue a bit better than any of the other candidates. But it's good to note that there's enough kind of like visual continuity with the fact that yellow flowers are a thing, and they help to they're part of the bric-a-brac of Jack's initiatory ritual state makeup. And he here has a flashback, so as you can see, the colouring is different to when he was yeah, obviously we know that he hadn't done it with Boy before, or at least we could have been pretty sure. And what he was seeing when he had that weird flash on the previous page wasn't a flashback, because a flashback appears to be grey, right? Not blue like it was on the other page. In fact, the blue colour is probably significant and to do with the sexy times. But he's not even interested in his sandwiches anymore. He's giving them to the pigeons. And he's having a flashback to the night that he left the Invisibles. And when he kind of took the bad army cop guy by surprise with an Uzi and shot him in the head with King Bob's gun. And he's remembering what it was like when the guy died. We knew that he was sad about it, but it's grim. And he's not just sad about it; he's actually traumatized about it. And for all of his bluster and dickishness, the pain that we're feeling with Jack here is, well, I won't say lovely, but it speaks jolly well to his character, doesn't it? It's very reassuring, at this point in the narrative that taking this guy's life, as much of an asshole as he was, it was an entirely justified thing. That wasn't to say he should have thought enjoy it or be able to put it behind him easily. It speaks very well to the kind of guy that Dane is. Again, look at the white space here, and how it kind of stands just a tiny bit apart from the flashback colouring. It is brilliant. It is brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Yeah. Over on the page, you've got an ad break. It's an ad for totally DC. It's a book. It's like a 60 years of the world's favourite comic book heroes. It's like a sort of a book with lots of pictures from old DC comics in it. Comic books way ahead of the curve. While the rest of the 20th century was determined to be new, by about the 70s, comic books were like cannibalizing their own past in a way which is really unseemly. Music, film kind of didn't start to do that for years yet, but DC had been doing it for 20 years by this point. Like reflogging and repackaging its own heritage for like cheap dollars, basically. How does you've got something, the best bit is probably this bit here. It's always good to have a picture of a monkey in a cage shouting at some scared onlookers. This page here of an early issue of Justice League, looks like the Justice League meets the Justice Society, is nice example of like Silver Age art. Cover famous comic book covers, Lois and Clark. Remember them? She was so hot. She was so... what was her name? She was in Desperate Housewives. I never watched that. Lois Lane. What was her name? She was well famous for a bit, but she went very Botoxy. But she was lush in Lois and Clark. We liked her a lot. And he, Superman, he's very MAGA, isn't he? He's very Trumpy. But whatever. Where this fits, the most important bit for us here, I think, is this bit. Is Shazam standing next to Billy Batson. He wasn't called Shazam back then. He was called Captain Marvel. And in fact, he probably still is called Captain Marvel in some books. But Shazam. Magic, and one's better magically empowered self, right? This issue is a bit about that, and so this here is important for them, for the status of the issue. Superheroes, bright colors, optimism, transformation of the human spirit to find the best thing inside you, and do well with it. Excellent shot of Jack Nicholson's Joker there too. Nice little advert. Lots to look at. Lots to keep your eyes busy. Terrible product. I can only imagine this big fat hardcover, presumably, probably quite expensive at the time. Would have been a terrible read for normies. You don't know anything about comics. It would have been awful. Another ad break over the page, and we're going to take our regular visit to Sam Goody Music Land. Neato. This, I don't often notice like the graphic design on the Sam Goody Music Land adverts, but this one's great. This is really strong design. So the kind of background picture is like basically a big pile of like welly boots, basically green boots. Well, I can't really tell what colour the boots are, but there's a very kind of like acidic, kind of like shiny green filter on them. So they're just like welly boots. I don't really know what the welly boots got to do with it, but they just looks good. And then this little inset panel here with the O of Nito is like a guy's mouth. And we've got the little Sam Goody HMV dog here. And the two corners, it's really nicely composed. The two corners have got this kind of offset orange, which is kind of popping with the cover of this Flaming Lips album. And the whole page really works as a piece of graphic design. Well done to the Sam Goody Music Land graphics team, doing a great job, guys. The albums that we've got to listen to are something by the Flaming Lips. What was it called? Clouds Taste Metallic. The Flaming Lips are a shit band. Sorry, I don't really know any other way to say it. I hate them. Full of like unearned grandeur. They don't really kind of they sort of have this kind of like toddlerish demand to be listened to, without giving the listener anything worth listening to. And they're just terrible. The best thing I can say about them is that the guy, and I presume that's like, the guy from the Flaming Lips, the one who's kind of always knocking around, trying to get attention. Looks very sexy there. He looks all sexy and drug fucked, and it's very good. Um, I was like, oh, I'll listen to an early Flaming Lips album. This is like '96. They'd already been going for 10 years. They've been around freaking ever. They're just an old rubbish band. They've never been good. Yeah, loads of kind of like pomposity and sort of like a centerless drama. Really, sort of. There's no kind of content. There's all just kind of like this bombast, hoping that you won't notice that that it's just boring, which is what it really is. And this other album here. Oh yeah, so thumbs down for the Flaming Lips. I didn't enjoy this other album either. Span Away. Yeah, the incredible new cut from Seaweed. Seaweed is a really rubbish name for a band. Uh, I guess weed is the point. Um, the cover for this one, uh, it's kind of so shit that I quite like it. Basically, there's somebody who's not really stoned, but kind of was stoned and is now just tired, in the back of the touring van or whatever. And he's noticed that if he looks through his cheap lighter, it, then everything goes green, which I think is kind of, and the graphics guys have kind of paid attention and done a really good job, as I say. But the graphics guy on the Seaweed album didn't do a good job. This is a deeply not very good photo to put on to have as your album cover, just like a stone guy's perspective taking a photo of a cheap lighter. It's not good. Span Away by Seaweed was just sort of boring, like, what's the name of that band, the big band that everyone likes, who are bad, the Flying Saucers. It's not that. The Foo Fighters. Seaweed sound like them, but like a less, like, the Foo Fighters do pretty boring music, but you can see why people like it. This sounds like that, but nobody likes it. So there. Yeah, that's so those are the two records of Sound Goody Music Land this week. There's a lot of music adverts in this issue though, and I don't know if I can remember whether I liked all the records or not. More Dead Soldier, and then Jack Dane's kind of fraught journey down memory lane continues. But this time he's kind of he's like digging up a repressed memory of what happened when he was in the park. He wasn't in this park, but when he was in the park feeding the pigeons, and Tom, tore the pigeon's eyes out of the pigeon's head and shoved them in Dane's eye sockets and gave Dane like a pigeon's eye view of the city of London and the enormous kind of like a bat devil beast thing lurking on top of St. Paul's. Really cool. This is kind of it happening again. And Tom is saying all sorts of like magic things. This magic and these old teachings of mine have to be set deep down inside you, Dane. It has to be done by shifting your awareness into a different place, in two worlds at the same time. And there are more than just two worlds. And again, the facial expressions here, like a really like tripped out looking Tom, is really cool. And the black and white colouring for the flashbacks is really effective because, as we've seen, blood stands out. These are moments of like the blood is the trauma in the memory that makes it seem so sort of sharp. So Dane's like kind of Dane's down memory lane, but he maybe hasn't been down these memory lanes before, right? Over the page onto page 6. This is like, how I was like really gushing in the previous bit about Paul Johnson's art. This is why it's just fantastic. This drawing of London is just it. It just looked like the streets of London just look like that. They look a bit like that now, but they've changed. But in the 90s, they just look like that. It's remarkable. What's also really interesting, so let's pick out a few details here. We're in capital newsagents. Capital is obviously the fuel that, like London, that more than kind of any other city in the world, eats. in order to kind of build itself from. Number 33, very important Masonic number, because there are 33 grades of Masonic initiation that will be relevant. I'm not just making it up because I'm mental, mentioning it because I'm mental. Baguette, which is like a kind of a coffee shop, kind of sandwich shoppy place next door to Capital, the newsagents, where Dane nicked his sandwiches. He would have got a nicer sandwich here, but it might have been harder to nick from. And then the newsagents is sandwiched between Baguette and Radio Rentals, which was where you could rent a shop where you could hire purchase. Don't know if you can hear that. That's my daughter having a wee. You could hire purchase radios and TVs. Radio Rentals is like very 80s and like old school Capital, right? Very straightforward like relationships between the purchaser and the supplier, very sort of like product based, but also like using debt to kind of skim and exploit the working class, right? Baguette is obviously like an avatar of a much more cuddly version of Capital, which was trying to build itself in the 90s. It was so there's a time slip here. This is like New London. This is like the old London that's being moved away from. Okay, Radio Rentals is like old school. Baguette is like new school, and in the middle you've got the newsagent Mercury, right? Kind of like doing creating the ideas that make, or not creating, kind of like speeding along the ideas that make the future possible from the past. Yeah. You can still see, like sandwich coffee shoppy places like Baguette. Definitely, they're still there 20 years on, because one of the things that this mode of transition did was slow down the progress of culture while speeding up the progress of technology. Right? That's one of the beefs of it's one of the kind of the problems that was embedded in the world that the Invisibles builds, but that the Invisibles either had no idea was embedded there and was a potential serious problem, or did know and didn't care. But yeah. Okay, so the reason that we've come back to the newsagents is because the owner of the shop where Dane nicked his sandwiches is being interrogated by these two members of Special Branch, because obviously they're tracking down Dane. The details here are just super amazing. The shopkeeper's body language is great. The Masonic cufflinks that the Special Branch guy has is good. The faces and just like the kind of the impatient sort of disrespectful glance that the cops share between themselves here, and the way that like the cops look like real people rather than just cops or just background characters is fantastic. It's really, I know I'm going on about it, but it's really rare that just like an artist would or even could make a couple of incidental characters like this just look like people, and they look like cops from the bill, albeit plainclothes. And there's a great detail here, which is okay. So they're looking at the CCTV, but the CCTV has mysteriously stopped working. And then, kind of in the final panel here, it's fairly clearly implied that this is kind of Dane's doing. This is like his powers. Yeah, this is like a superhero narrative. I probably should have said this back on the previous ad break, but one of the things that the Invisibles obviously is like a slightly sideways superhero story, and this kind of probing of the structure and aesthetics of a superhero narrative, turning it into like a sweary, ravey, rebellious thing, which it isn't what it is usually. Indeed, part of that probing that Grant Morrison did here and in his comic The Justice League, which starts to come out fairly soon after this, I think, that probing and pushing is partly what sort of unlocks some of the thinking that was hidden inside the superhero sort of genre, iconography that enabled it to become, the kind of the template storyline for 21st century Hollywood, basically. Thanks for that. Depending on what your opinion of the superhero takeover of culture is, and you'd be daft if it was entirely positive. Let's be honest. This is kind of happening here, and this making CCTV not work when you're nicking sandwiches. That's Dane's superpower. We'll see. He's got other superpowers, but that's one of them. Casual racism from the cops. It's horrible. Yeah, we really don't like them. This is the other thing, is that we really don't. The For all of its like ambiguity, The Invisibles is kind of at its best when it reminds you who the goodies and the baddies are and why. And there are certain things which make it really clear, and that's we still live in nuanced times, possibly even more so than ever. But those things are true. It's not hard to spot the goodies and the baddies. Sorry, back to where I was. Detail. The shopkeeper can't explain why his CCTV stopped working and is having trouble explaining it to the cops. They're kind of impatient with him. His body language and waving his hands around is great, and it's also mirrored by this box that he's next to, which has got "Av" in it on it, and like a raver. It's very like difficult to see, but this is like "Av" in it is like a rave statement that the concept of boxes is obviously important to raving as well, because of the way that it describes the types of dancing that you do. But remember what I was saying about Dread Zone in the previous part? Rave has come indoors. I'm not sure what's meant to be in these boxes, whether it's like rave magazines, which were just beginning to emerge at this time, because the culture was one which was suddenly kind of like packageable, or energy drinks. It could be energy drinks that are in here called Avenit, which is a brilliant name for an energy drink. But yeah, the kind of the guy with his the kind of the silhouette of the guy with his hands in the air, having it on these boxes is brilliant. And kind of if you're me, you can kind of find layers of meaning if you want. You can find layers of meaning in there. But more importantly, it's just a really great sort of made up 90s detail, because like whatever is in those boxes, it could be real. Page 7. Oh yeah, the Invisible Man. Yeah, they say the Invisible Man at the end, because that is what Dane is, right? Yeah, you knew that. Over onto page 7, we are we have more flashback here. But before we get to the flashback, there's not really a flashback. There's just like a link to the past, which is this writing of the word Barbalith on the wall. Now, I'm not sure that I've ever explicitly told you, dear viewer, what Barbalith is. I'm sure you kind of know. But he has seen it written in a very similar font on the wall. And remember, the paint was still wet. How was that? On the wall where Dane of the underground station, the abandoned underground station, where Dane had his initiation experience with Tom in issue. Is it 2 or is it 3? I think it's 2. And then this vision of seeing this same writing on the wall triggers his flashback. However, and we see, I love the way actually they're like Tom floats around like a little ghost in the background of this issue. He's in Dane's memories, but he's also kind of talking to him in the present. It's really nice because we kind of think that Tom is dead, but because Edith said that she lost her connection with him last time we saw her when she was with King Mob in Paris. But he's kind of not dead, is he? He's kind of just dispersed through time, should we say, and is very much alive and well and relevant and offering useful help in places like memory and the past, and the dream time, things like that. That's not what even this page is about. This page is about the stuff on the wall, because it's more evidence of just kind of like the Invisibles as a comics effort to kind of time itself, to kind of ground itself in a space. That's kind of what all good pop culture should do. It should only be possible for a thing to occur in the time that it occurs. If an artifact of pop culture appears at one point and you think to yourself, that could have happened at any point in the last however long, then it's not good. It's not right. The sweet spot, or the kind of the better than sweet spot, the kind of the magic spot, is when a cultural artifact does that, but also kind of hooks forward and outwards, forwards and backwards out into like deeper time, in much the same way that like Barbalith and the Invisibles can connect with, I didn't expect this issue to be so plague relevant. I didn't expect to be living through plague times as I read it. And yet, as the kind of the way that it poked me into reading the Camino Burano and O Fortuna, shows that it is. It's not like it's very of its time, but it's not stuck in its time. It's still very active here at different points in time, which is why reading the Invisibles isn't a total waste of time. Am I justifying myself? Okay, this is a very London wall. Not London Wall, but this is a very London wall, which is to say that it's got loads of, and you don't get this in many places in England, but you get it a lot in London, which is posters for gigs and records stuck up randomly on the wall. Not randomly, I mean, yeah, it feels random quite a lot, and indeed it is. So what we need to mention is that one of the bands that are on tour in London at the moment with their first British tour is the Root Doctors, which is Jim Crow's band. So that's either just a nice callback to issue 10, I think it was, the Jim Crow in the Chicago Voodoo one, or if it's maybe more. Is he going to be coming back? So that's a made-up band that's on the wall, but next to the made-up band on the wall are some real bands. So Supergrass is one of them, and that's kind of interesting because when a few issues ago, Supergrass's first album, I Should Coco, was, if you remember, one of the albums in Sam Goody's Music Land advert. And yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Underworld is another one of the posters that are on the wall here that Dane's looking at. That is kind of such a perfect contemporary detail that it hurts. This is their album Dub No Bass with My Headman, I want to say. I did listen to it. It wasn't my cup of tea. I didn't really like it at the time. I think it's too sort of brittle and glassy. It's too built musically. These first, well, Underworld's music generally, in my opinion, it's too built for the kind of glassy coffee tables that it would be played in the flats of. Does that make sense? It's got a weird it's music that feels a bit like 90s architecture. It's kind of a bit too thin and brittle and sort of tries really hard to create a mood, but doesn't really find a groove. Yeah, I'm not keen on it. I didn't mind the second Underworld album at the time, but you kind of had to like that one because of train spotting and stuff. But this first one, I listened to it again. It wasn't great, and some of the like the rave poetry in it is rubbish, frankly, and not just rubbish. I mean, okay, as poetry, it's fine, but as like a man standing up and saying this to you, it's absurd. It's just rubbish. All this like tech kind of raving sort of stuff, like cut-ups. It's like it's not cool. My funny joke is that the guy who's the singer in Underworld, I can't remember his name, is now Dominic Cummings, the the evil Rasputin like advisor to Boris Johnson, the UK Prime Minister, because they both have this kind of naff tech vision of the world, right? Uh, yeah, and it just makes me laugh a lot to think that Dominic Cummings used to be the singer in Underworld in the 90s. I watch some footage from the last 5 years or so of Underworld, because they're still out on the circuit, and watch it and you'll be like, oh, I can't believe I ever like this. That's my uh, that's my prediction. The poster here that Paul Johnson has thrown in appears to be modelled on, the album cover artwork for Dub No Bass with My Headman, which is a brilliant album cover. Like, you, the interesting thing about Underworld was that they were also like a graphic design company as well as being like a techno rock band, um, and their influence and their graphic design was better than their music, really. And their influence in graphic design is still really strong and noticeable. And the cover of had this wonderful kind of it kind of it looks like the music wants to sound, but the music doesn't quite manage to sound like it, which is this very sort of big, blippy, packed minimalism. It's quite paradoxical, but it's a great bit of cover up. I recommend you go and look for it. We've also got in the corner here, we've got the word pulp, which is an advert, obviously here, which is an advert for the band Pulp. Pulp are like the Britpop band that you're not allowed to slag off, but the further away I get from them in time, the more I despise them. Actually, the um, the dynamic, or the kind of the dialectic, if you like, that I was describing between poptimism and rockism, these kind of like rough and smooth, authentic and plastic modes of like British class consciousness. Pulp were on the poptimist side of that, and they're like a Blairite human league. Like, who needs them? Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, I don't like Pulp. Uh, they lent into this kind of harmful and uh, sort of harmful war of obliteration between these two strands of British culture, um, in a way which was really like toxic, I think. Their song Misshapes, we thought at the time, which is like this anthem about the poptimists beating the rocktimists. Rocktimists sounds better than rockist, actually. It's like this anthem that's about that, and it's like their signature song. Oh, they got to is their other signature song as well as Common People, which is a much easier song to like, admittedly. Um, but Misshapes is we thought it was about the right to sort of wear ironic tracksuit tops, and that was kind of all right. But actually, if you listen to it now, it's basically a justification of Silicon Valley nerd culture to obliterate the world, and that's not okay. That's not okay, and that has that and Pulp's side, insofar as that's true, did win, and they have made the world very, very bad. They've the power that they were given through their victory has been far from an unequivocally good thing. Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I don't just hear that song nowadays and cringe. I hear that song and lament, like the way that history sort of went. Uh, Finally, on this page, we have a poster for the band Mulligan and O'Hare. Now, remember how I talked about? And it's at this stage I couldn't say by Mulligan and O'Hare. The track should be called At This Stage I Cannot Say, not couldn't, cannot. So a bit like the Mike Flowers Pops, who are in the charts with their kind of kitsch, ironic, poptimist version of Wonderwall. I'd never listened to like the George Harrison album Wonderwall before, but I listened to it this week. Fell down a rabbit hole of like Nazi paedophiles. Awful, awful stuff, terrible. And also I started watching Jean-Luc Godard movies this week, which was a mistake because now I don't think that J.G. Ballard's any good anymore. Yeah. Or at least I don't think the ideas belong to him. Yeah. Funny how things turn out. Mike Flowers, Pops, and Wonderwall were this kind of pastiche of sort of mid 60s to late 70s easy listening culture. Yeah, easy. Mulligan and O'Hare are a comedy invention by the comedians Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer that are kind of the same thing. They're like a, they have all the kind of the nylon and like slick down hair and kind of pastel cut and like kind of like overexposed pastel coloring of the Mike Flowers Pops and the easy listening era. Uh, but the kind of the joke is that there is that all of like the sort of the all of like the sexual rage, which Easy was kind of deliberately sitting on top of the whole time, is kind of like brought to the surface. And so they kind of so Mulligan and O'Hare kind of have these like just like very incongruous kind of like pointy nipples underneath their tight polo necks and stuff, and they they aren't easy and smooth and assured in their delivery. They kind of they shriek their songs with uh kind of like rage, and they're very funny actually. Like yeah, they're really good. So that's part of this dynamic is all still going on here. Mulligan and O'Hare are part of this, groovy baby. What's the guy's name? Austin Powers culture thing that's trying to be sucked into the '90s here to give it to give them some purchase, to give them like a foothold to dig against as they start to kind of climb out of this kind of like frankly horrible morass of like um, post-war England, like post Thatcher post-war England. Ugh, the '90s like had a lot to want to not be, you know. Uh, Unfortunately, the thing they made wasn't that great. But you can you can forgive the hurry to create anything else because all they had to look back on was rationing and Thatcher and the Beatles. Anyway. Okay, before we go on, so yeah, so this track here, uh, Mulligan and O'Hare. At this stage, I couldn't say. Should be called at this stage. I cannot say, and I'm going to read the lyrics to it because what it is an excellent, actually, an excellent like example of the of like um, comic verse, basically of like humorous poetry, which is kind of um, one of the quintessentially English art forms, which is a terrible and true thing to say. Okay, so the lyrics to the Mulligan and O'Hare song at this stage I cannot say because they used to appear in like there was like a sketch show. Uh, Reeves and Mortimer had a sketch show. Some of the sketches would be Mulligan and O'Hare sketches, and they would do songs. And this is one of their songs. And the lyrics to the song are: I'm not saying I didn't love you or that I'm happy that you're dead, but my doctor did advise you to keep a rifle by your bed. I'm not saying I didn't kill you, but aren't you partially to blame? You gave me chocolate digestives when you knew I preferred the plain. I'm not saying I'll forget you, but please remind me of your name. My memory's somewhat distorted since I became insane. Yeah. Uh, I just quite like that. I just think that's good. Sort of Edward Lear meets oh no, a biscuit. What's his name? Alan Bennett. Uh, it's yeah, it's good. It's good. Mulligan and O'Hare, folks. Page 8. Not much really happens on page 8, but we are led up to the so we're flashed back to issue 2, back in the abandoned tube tunnel of initiation. The paint on the wall is still wet. The words are alive. Dane is still caned on the blue mold, and Tom warns him gravely that initiation, or this type of initiation, always hurts. And he says, "This is the key, Dane." He gives him a key, and he says, "This is the key, Dane. The key to the locker at the swimming baths." When I don't know. I just think that like a smelly old homeless man, like giving you like the key to the locker room at the swimming baths is just dirt. Is just dirty. It's just rude. And then Tom leaves him because initiations like this must be faced on by oneself, and he kind of slinks off, and then this kind of eerie green light starts to bleed in. And before we see what's producing that green light, we get an advert for a Batman novel, not a graphic novel, just a novel, just like a book with words telling a story about Batman. And the art's really interesting here, I think. I can't quite see what it is. I think the kind of the artwork for this advert is, it almost looks like a photo of um, an old 60s Batman toy. It looks very much like a solid. It looks more like a photo than a drawing, but it doesn't look like a photo of a person. It could be. It could have just been like they could have just got an actor to dress up as Batman, but I think it looks more like a toy. It's a great shot because you can't quite see what it is. It's got this kind of weird air of like it's got this weird feeling of unreality to it, and there's like a sort of a plastic solidity to the Batman here, to your bat. In the heart of Gotham City, we could probably say that Dane is currently in the heart of London City, being in the underground tunnel tube of initiation. A hero discovers the world's most horrifying crime and a shocking secret that could change him forever. Okay, yes, see the next few pages, basically. So this Batman novel is called The Ultimate Evil, and it's written by Andrew Vax, who's like a fairly well-known kind of like crime fiction author. I don't really know much about him, and I've never read any of his work, but I did because I'm just like diligent. I did Google him to see like what was it that kind of to see if there was anything about this Batman novel, because there's something so silly about the idea of a Batman novel. Uh, Andrew Vax, like before concurrently with him being a crime author, he like worked in child protection services in the US, dealing with like victims of like child trafficking and abuse, like really, 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 really dark stuff. And that was what a lot of his early novels, at least, or and short stories, were about. And indeed, that's the ultimate evil that Batman is investigating uh, in this novel is um, like a ring of rich Epsteinian child traffickers. It's very messed up indeed. It's very good. And Batman kind of has to go to Thailand to, you know, cut the supply off at its source and stuff. And yeah, and it's all about like Batman's sort of the secret that Batman uncovers is that his mum, before she died, was on the trail of this group of elite paedophiles. Familiar? Yeah. Uh, remember that Jeffrey Epstein's conspiracy theory time. Remember that Jeffrey Epstein's butler is called Alfred. Who else do we know who's got a butler called Alfred? Uh, Bruce Wayne's mum was investigating this ring of elite paedophiles who have been operating in Gotham for decades. It's really grim. Uh, and that was why she was killed. And then Batman kind of uncovers her files and goes after them basically because so there's a nice kind of Batman avenging his parents thing there, and also fighting what is indeed a very real and very nasty crime perpetrated by the real life members of Batman's class. So that's and who kind of run the world, right? We can't. I know that Epstein's all very passé because we've got the virus now, but we really mustn't forget what that whole thing actually did reveal about the way the world works. And a kind of contrast really interestingly, I think. So if we think that there was a previous advert in this issue, which is kind of like very light and sunny and Apollonian and Superman focused, about kind of the taking on of one's superhero nature. And then we get Batman doing it in a way which is altogether more. So these kind of two superhero adverts in the issue provide these kind of punctuation points describing these kind of tonal shifts in what's happening in the issue itself. And Batman is this kind of very much like the superhero avatar of like the unconscious and indeed of traumatic initiation. His kind of like gatekeeping of the next few pages, and what happens is very relevant. Similarly, this advert on the next page for Anthrax's album Stomp, which makes them sound like Stomp, right? Do you remember them? Like the guys who used to uh, bang on bins to make music, and we're on telly all the time. I can tell you a thing about Stomp. I won't because it's not well. It never stops me, but it's not really relevant. But if I ever see you, ask me about Stomp, and I'll tell you about them, about why I brought them up and didn't want to talk about it. So this is the Anthrax record, Stomp 442. Look, man, look at that. That there is the metal sun from Lord Fanny's Initiation. More on that later. And the city sun in Jim Crow's Voodoo Vision Quest, right? Both of those invisible journeys into the other world feature this metal sun icon. Yeah, the radical insider, the thing that beats the heart of the earth, kind of thing, maybe, and also kind of like the kind of the black heart of consciousness existence. And that appears here in the issue just as Dane is about to undergo a similar process that those other guys had. Yeah, that is definitely what that is, guys. Again, also it is just a mash of cars. See, Jean-Luc Godard and J.D. Ballard. I did not think that. I didn't mind it. It was better than the other two records. What gets me about Anthrax, particularly, I'm not really that into thrash. I much prefer. I'm not into thrash at all, actually, to be honest. I much prefer my metal to be slow and very heavy, and to have a groove in it. And the thing that really struck me about this record, Stomp 442 by Anthrax, was that for all of their kind of like rough, these are rough guys. These guys rock. These guys are rough and rocky, and they rock out because they rock. They obviously also spend a lot of time in record studios making sure that their guitars sound very shiny and crisp, and they're playing them very sort of fast and choppily. But there's a real like produced like quality to them, and for all of their um like we're Anthrax, we're crazy kind of energy, they they're like boring guitar dads as well. Uh, so yeah, so that's Anthrax. That amused me that they'd obviously spent ages trying to make their guitars sound very professional. Like Jeremy Clarkson would or something, the famous guitarist in Dire Straits, Jeremy Clarkson. So let's get into it. We're back in the underground tunnel, and the Greys done come for Dane. This is very much his abduction happening. Over onto page 10, we get this ace spread. It's not a spread, but it kind of, it is a spread, but it looks like it kind of wants to be a single picture, but it isn't. But Paul Johnson has just kind of made the composition work like it is anyway. You don't read it like two conjoined pages, you read it like two separate pages, but it looks like it could be a single image or, a single reading image. And it's great. I think I mentioned it before, but there's a real, on the bits like this, there's like a real sort of toothiness. Like you feel like you could kind of bite his art. And it's a really good description of what you get of these abduction scenarios, which is that the kind of the scenery often has this kind of ceramic, too smooth, too real quality to it. The kind of what people can remember of the physical surroundings is that they're made of a strange material which has a kind of which is somewhere between like a ceramic and a plastic, and has this kind of very particular sheen and quality to it. And this feels like that to me. Okay, so obviously we kind of need to talk about. Let's go back to the cover. One of the things that's not very good about this cover is the way, but and I get that it's necessary, but it's just weird. Is the way that it kind of, by '96, this grey iconography was naff. Okay, The Invisibles is trying very hard and succeeds not to be, and it succeeds to be a not naff comic. Comics are always going to be a bit naff. You just have to get used to that. But some of them are naffer than others. And this and The Invisibles is kind of like one of the least naff comics insofar as it kind of, insofar as it kind of gets its hands dirty with the other forms of pop culture that are around at the time, engages with them, and beats them at their own game in a lot of ways. But this iconography here, this grey thing, this Whitley Strieber communion thing, was already out of date and naff by this point, and very much, and this is why it's here, very much a icon of the outdoor nature worship, late 80s, early 90s rave culture. Yeah, that's, obviously when you're outdoors raving, you stare up at the sky a lot and you see aliens. And to see one at this point in '96, feel, especially just when like Britpop is happening and really and raving is turning into clubbing, and we're really trying to, there's a big effort to put all of this kind of behind us at this point. And the way that Morrison sort of like digs that iconography back up again is kind of brave. And from this distance works perfectly, actually. It doesn't seem too incongruous at all that there should be such a radically weird portion to a working class kid's experience of alienation and initiation in London in the '90s. The fact that it should take on such a radically weird character as this actually feels kind of right. But at the time, this was like, whoa, this contrasts so heavily with, not with the Invisibles, but with the way that the Invisibles was kind of knocking on the door of the music press and trying to be that by throwing in all of this alien shit. It basically just really nerds out. It's really trying hard not the Invisibles is like, it's not that in its attitude. It's not that nerdy a comic, but at this point, it really just becomes a total fucking nerd by going on about aliens and stuff. And it's great. We've learned so much in such a short period of time. We basically, so this green thing here, yeah, the circle. Remember, the green circle is also the same as the red circle. Traffic lights. Dane saw it for the first time during at this point in issue 2, and then he sees it again in issue 4 when he goes into the strange sort of farmland area. This is worth saying because it tells you a lot about just what the Invisibles is on about and feeds into a lot of the other stuff that Fanny's has happened to Lord Fanny and everyone. Just as the interpenetration of a spherical form into a two-dimensional plane is seen as a circle of varying diameters, so too does the interpenetration of gap into your three-dimensional continuum appear as a lens form capable of altering its shape. The word in the gap is barblith because it's been pulled out of these speech balloons, sorry, and thrown onto the wall, right? That's why it's still wet. And Dane is having a very unpleasant Strieber-esque, classically Strieber-esque abduction experience here. Grant Morrison is a kind of a abduction survivor too, a survivor experiencer. I don't know what the preferred term is. Actually, I should probably have found that out beforehand. He's an abduction experiencer, and his abduction didn't involve any of this like obvious like cock attack stuff that Dane's does. I mean, look at that. Let's go on this side. Look at that. That's no messing, is it? Obviously, there's a heavy kind of like sexual machine rape element to a lot of abduction scenarios. This is kind of like tentacle for tentacle, and anal probe for anal probe, using the 1989 Christopher Walken starring adaptation of Whitley Strieber's book Communion for its look and feel. I don't know if you've seen it. You, like, watch it actually, like, because Christopher Walken's is brilliant in it. Christopher Walken, basically, I think Christopher Walken did Communion and King of New York back to back. I'm not going to say that Communion is as good a film as King of New York, because the Muppets in it do look a bit dodgy. But but like Christopher Walken was like on fire at the time. King of New York I watched again recently. That is a brilliant film. Communion is well worth a watch, because there's just some great bits of like Christopher Walken and these like these alien grey Muppets, puppets, or are they? Just sort of communing, just sort of grooving. They just kind of rave a bit together and understand. And this felt, and which feels, and it's so perfectly 1989, because this grey head thing was like the dominant cultural artifact, along with the smiley face, that it kind of sort of grew through. It grew from behind and through. Put the Watchmen face over this, and then take it away, and you've got that. For the first half of the 1990s, so much so because it actually, this had been cooking away since like 1986 or something, and then by the 90s it got put into the movies, and then in the early 90s, in 1989 it got put into the movies just in time for the 90s to happen, and then the X-Files in 93, I think, and into this, which is obviously a very, as I say, nerdy and alien-y comic book series. How long have I been going? I'll go for an hour. I was going to stop after an hour, just because I felt that like an hour worked well as like a chapter length last time. Let's at least get through this bit. Where was I? Yeah, this kind of what am I trying to say? Yeah, this alien iconography thing erupts back into this concept of London and pop and the past, as kind of like a missing, suppressed portion of what's actually going on in the 90s. It's like, look, it's like, I know that you're all coming in from the fields, guys, but have you forgotten what you saw in the fields? Yeah. And London was very happy to close forget what it had seen in the fields, and just get really into cocaine. And this comic is about that, but that doesn't happen for another year or two yet. And the Invisible kind of like goes, you're going to forget this happened, aren't you? You're going to forget that you went raving, aren't you? And everyone else is going to go, yeah, we're just having fun indoors now. It's like, yeah, it's not the same, is it? You're not seeing that anymore. And that's kind of why this issue sort of, it kind of takes a gamble on this like naffness, and actually performs the most devastating critique by reinserting that weirdness back into this Britpop moment. Dane kind of metabolizes it in a way which is interesting, and we'll get to in a minute. But there's lots of good like Invisible's lore here. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna go here. So Grant Morrison's like an abduction experiencer, but he didn't have any, or at least, and he's written about it quite a lot. But it didn't have any anal probes or anything. It was just like kind of like nice shiny globs of wisdom with big eyes that showed him the history of the universe, kind of thing. Which is nice, and that's cool of them, because they're kind of cool guys. Or are they? I did a podcast with my mate Rosie called The Shadow Trap. We still do it every now and again, on the Greys. I would and I haven't listened back to it, because even though it was only a year or so ago that we did it, I would say that my thinking about a lot of the stuff that I said about it, about the Greys and what this icon means and came from and its reality, I was probably hopelessly wrong. So I'm hesitant to recommend that you should go and listen to it to find out what I think the greys are. But do, feel free. But I was probably hopelessly wrong. It was I was probably downplaying. I just think Aleister Crowley's maybe a bit more influential than like modern metropolitan wisdom would try to have you believe. That's just what I think. That's just my little supposition there. Morrison's vision of or version of the abduction scenario is a lot cleaner and less traumatic than Strieber's, but it's definitely kind of the same kind of thing. They're kind of Whitley Strieber is like super bright. He's got a very good listening voice as well. His podcast is quite interesting. His wife, his wife had been with him kind of throughout his entire life. Died within the past few years, I think, and it's very sad. And but but Strieber is having very convincing afterlife communication with her, which is kind of worth listening to, because he's got a very interesting voice and he talks about himself way too much. But he's got like a podcast over. He talks about himself like a lot. He's a bit kind of overly interiorized, I would say. But he was phenomenally bright, very successful at a very young age in the world of like novel publishing, screenwriting, and advertising. Then had this abduction experience and became kind of even more successful for a bit, and then kind of became so closely identified with his biggest success that he sort of became less successful, if you like. But also that no more so than like the normal relative levels of success across someone's lifespan. It's just that he's become kind of a bit of a unfairly, let me stress, I think, become a bit of a what's the word? Punchline. Yeah. One of the things that Strieber talks about a lot lately, as well as his kind of dead wife who he still talks to, is these memories. And I think he talks about them in Communion, but he places a lot more weight on them now. They're kind of glossed over a bit in Communion. I haven't read it for a very long time, so I could be wrong. When he was a child, very strange experiences when he was a child. Perhaps, basically, what am I trying to say? Conspiracy time again. Basically, Whitley Strieber was was identified as a very bright young child, was experimented on by MK Ultra, was given psychic powers, and those psychic powers manifested as alien contact, is what I'm saying. I would say that Grant Morrison's life might map to that a bit more closely than might otherwise be understood. I'm aware that this kind of speculation about people's private lives and stuff is icky, so I'm not going to go too much further with it. But there are definite interesting parallels between the careers of Grant Morrison and Whitley Strieber in terms of their kind of like extravagant intelligence, success in the creative industries from a young age, and like visionary capabilities, and maybe some other stuff. But again, icky. Don't want to go there. Both seem like pretty decent gents. Let's be honest. This is a magic stone, says the alien. We're gonna. Do you understand? It is made from space, Barbly. We are going to put it in your head and activate your third eye and chakra. So that's what the scar on Dane's head in issue 3 is, or issue 2/3. Yeah, he does get abducted. They do experiment on him, and they do put an alien implant in his head. I think Willie Streeber's got one in his ear or something. Is that right? I think so. The implant will form a 4-dimensional superconducting crystal structure designed to bond with neural DNA. Call it a magic mirror stroke UFO. So the magic mirror substance that Fanny keeps puking up when she's high is this chakra stone that she kind of, that I guess is being put into her by the moth butterfly thing. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of part of the thing. That's part of this process of invisibilization. The like during like fairy abduction scenarios, during you know shamanic initiation experiences. Sorry for using the word shamanic. And indigenous cultural initiation practices, this kind of introduction of an alien element inside the body, which is often like a stone, um, could just be a metaphor for sexual trauma, obviously. Um, but is also kind of like part of the thing is that the fairies or the aliens or the initiatory spirits of the tribe that come to you at these kind of like threshold moments of growth and initiation and rites of passage, um, will introduce a foreign element into your body. And so it's happening here. Dane responds absolutely brilliantly, and this is what makes this is probably one of my favorite bits of this issue, which is an issue that I like a lot already. He just in his thoughts, but they're kind of in like thought world. In his thoughts, he just kind of gets a stick, batters the alien's head open, and it's brilliant because they look, you know, these aliens are very, very punchable, aren't they? There's something about them which does make you sort of want to just to sort of test what they're made of, batter their heads open with a big stick. And indeed, Dane does that, but he's only doing it in his thoughts, and the alien could see his thoughts. And we've got like our kind of our taller grey here, and then next to him we've got our kind of our dwarf greys, the kind of the server drone greys, which is a feature that's very closely taken from Strieber. That they're the kind of the greys which like look like the greys that we think, and then there are these kind of like more choggy ones which seem to do all the work. And Dane says, and the alien goes, "Don't be silly. You can't hurt us. We're not really here," kind of thing. Or violence, Barbalith. You cannot act effectively here. And then Dane says, "I know you. I've talked to you before." No, sorry, don't do a Scouse accent. That buzzing noise coming through the wallpaper. And then there are all of these eyes kind of coming off of these tentacles looking at Dane. And they say, "As a child, we spoke through your toys." So Dane's been marked for this for a long time. And they spoke through the toys. And also, let's remember that Bobby Murray maybe is being spoken to by his toys, but we think maybe there are invisibles doing that. That's in the Best Man Fall issue, yeah? Then, very classic 90s. This stuff doesn't emerge so much. Obviously, the abduction experience is somewhat socially constructed and individually co-constructed by the person being abducted. And the 90s were, I would say, a more optimistic time than the early 21st century. And so this kind of message that the grey gives to Dane, you don't get quite so much. But he says, "Understand, you are the chosen one. This is your time. Your world is dying. Bad news. But you can lead your people to global peace and harmony. Good news." You don't get that quite as much anymore. Like this is like the Space Brothers hypothesis, yeah, that the aliens are waiting to just kind of like super civilize us and make us into space communists. Up for it. What can I say? And he tells him to fuck off because he's Dane. He doesn't want to lead his people to global peace and harmony. And then Dane's like, "This is shite. This isn't a fucking spaceship. You're not real aliens. This is just like a film, except it's in 3D." And the alien responds to that by saying, "Good." So like, yes, it is. Yes, I am. I'm not an alien. I'm not a spaceship. It is like a film. It is like 3D. And the alien goes, "Good. Okay, then we're going to show you the truth." Boo! And then the kind of the kind of on a spaceship bit sort of melts away, and we get just like total like psychedelic time here, and a very useful phrase to remember when you're thinking about the old metaphysics here. Uh, the soul is not in the body is inside the soul. Do you understand? Good little bit of lesson there. Good little bit of this is what the universe is for you there, guys. What I really like about this episode, so we get this Mobius strip because it's like, well, whose side are you on? Who are the goodies? Who are the baddies? Where is time? Um, And then you have all this jumble of kind of like Sanskrit-esque sort of just doodling almost here. But look, okay, let's do this. Here it says shit, and here it says wanker, and here, where is it? Yeah, here it sort of says fucking. Basically, all of this like groovy Sanskrit, this like language mash, is all of Dane's, Jack's favourite words. It's just swear words. It's funny. It's a good joke. Um, he falls into the red eye of Barbalith. He's surrounded by magic mirror blobs, which are him. This is the body embedded in the soul. Yeah. So the soul stuff that Fanny keeps puking up is inside her, but really it's kind of what we're made of. And he has this big old flashback, and then brilliantly, Dane goes, he remembers all this, and you think that he'd be like, oh, I just remembered my abduction. Oh my god, it's such a big deal. And he just because he's Dane and he's Jack and we like him. He's not having any of this bullshit. He's too rockist and down to earth for any of this, and this isn't populism, this is sci-fi nerd shit. But he's too authentic. He's not having it. He just thinks of these aliens with dicks, which is and they seem like nice dicks, and they're definitely trying to help him. They're definitely trying to teach him, and they give him a good, hopeful, aspirational model for the kind of person that he could be. And his whole attitude is just, which is great. And then back to reality, although it's the reality of this kind of big white empty space that Paul Johnson's using so well. And a voice comes in from off panel. Lost in thought, what? We know who that is. Okay, I'm still only halfway through, and I've been going for an hour, and I did sort of only want to do an hour because I think it's a nice little portion. So I'm going to come back and we'll do another hour, probably next weekend. Maybe before, probably next weekend. Because I'm still going to be on lockdown and just be like another 7 days madder than I am already. We're going to get into the final half of this issue, and we'll do the letters page, and it's a very important letters page to do. And we're going to find out who the owner of that annoying posh voice was, and we're going to see how Dane metabolizes his alien experience to create this nationhood being identity, but not one that you think it is. Not one that you think it is. I might not use his camera again. The backwards thing is quite annoying. And the chaos magic bit at the end. We'll do all that. But for now, I think, yeah, these nice, while I'm not allowed outdoors, these little hour-long chunks are nice, aren't they? So I've gone a bit over an hour, but not too much. And I don't want to go on anymore. I want to go and chat to my family and drink more lager. And that's what we're going to do until next time. Okay, so thanks ever so much for watching. I know it's a bit of a marathon trawl through this here issue of The Invisibles, but it's worth it because it's a really great issue and there's a lot of thought stuff in there. And, pure magic, guys, pure magic. Cheers for watching. Tell me I'm an idiot on @BobsyMindless on Twitter. I would love to have 1,000 followers. I've got 980. I'd love to get to 1,000 before the end of 2020. Tell your friends to follow this weird bold guy. Thanks ever so much. I hope that your family are keeping safe in the plague. I hope that you're not going to be mad from lockdown if you are still. And what's the other one? Wash your hands? Yeah, fuck it. All right. You don't have to wash your hands if you don't want to. I don't care. Cheers. Bye.